Many have dreams of going viral. Few have ever made it happen. My guest today, though, definitely has. She has over 82 million views on YouTube, nearly 400,000 followers on TikTok, and over 300,000 followers on Instagram. Her content ranging from all things animation, comedy, the quote-unquote corporate verse, which I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about. Welcome to the show, Tawny PLATIS.
Thank you so much for having me.
I got to tell you, I'm a little intimidated right now because you are the most this is the closest to a celebrity that I've ever talked to. As I got scrolling through your views, I was like, holy man, this is nuts. Like, it's absolutely incredible what you've been able to accomplish. And I mean, I don't want to say over a relatively short period of time, but it seems like it happened pretty quick once you started going. But I am curious, do you remember the first, we'll call it viral video? Like the first one where it's like, I posted videos, I got a few hundred views or whatever, but then all of a sudden this one just hit and you're like, holy crap.
I do, yeah. For me, that was TikTok, actually, and it was
Okay.
during 2020. And I think it was like, I'd only posted a couple of videos that had gotten like a couple thousand views or something. And I was like, getting some steam here, getting some traction. And then I did this one where I was doing like a parody of like kids stuff. Cause I do, or at the time I was doing a lot of like kids apps and content and games and that kind of thing. And I was doing like, if they were honest, that was like the whole joke of the bit was like, if kids apps were honest. And that one got about 500,000 views. And I was like, maybe I have something here. Maybe this is how I should be marketing myself, is leaning more into social media in this way instead of using it in the more traditional way for marketing.
How soon until you got to your first million plus?
For views?
Yeah. Do you remember when, like, your first video that went to 1 million or crossed over 1 million? I mean, that's got to be intimidating just to go from a few, 1,000 here or there to all of a sudden like 500,000.
Yeah.
That in of itself has got to be a little bit intimidating. But when you hit 1 million, you're like, that's just like a threshold, right? It's just one of those, it's a big number.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. I think it was a comedy sketch because I did comedy for quite a few years. I mean, I'm still doing comedy, but I was doing some stand-up at the time, and I was doing improv shows and stuff around that, stuff like that here in San Diego. And I think it was some kind of comedy sketch, I want to say, but it's so funny that you asked that because now I'm realizing like enough time's gone by. I'm like, I don't remember.
They all go to 1 million plus now. So what difference does it ultimately make?
Well, that's something I'd actually like to talk about too for people who are like, you were saying, oh, the viral thing, and it goes up and down. It fluctuates so much. And I've had many videos do several million views. I released something last week that got 10,000 views. It's a very fickle algorithm that we work with.
I think that's actually really important to understand too, because I think there's an expectation that, once you get there, whatever there is for you, I want to consistently get 50,000. I want to consistently get 500,000, 1 million, whatever. It doesn't just mean that it's going to be automatic. Even if you've built the audience and you've built the following, at the end of the day, we are literally all at the mercy of the algorithms. And, God bless the person that can fully and completely understand the algorithm, right?
Oh, totally. That is so much of my day is spent analyzing and researching, testing that algorithm, which is a bummer in a lot of ways because, I'm sure you understand this. I'm a creative, I want to be creating stuff and I'm doing analytics, which I also like, so I can't complain too much, but, I would rather be making videos.
It's an important distinction though, right? You can't just, if this is the way that you choose to market yourself, if this is the path that you're going to follow, I want to do video, I want to make it work on TikTok, Instagram, whatever. It isn't just coming up with the idea for the video. There's a lot of background, unsexy research that goes in to making that video go to, 1 million plus views or whatever. And I think that's part of what everybody overlooks. But one thing that I was curious about, and I really want to know your thoughts on this. I've never had anything go viral, but I've had instances like on X, for example, where I've shared a post that's just clicked and all of a sudden my notifications are pinging and pinging and pinging. I'm like, holy crap, and I start to get really nervous. I'm like, oh crap, because I'm like, I know it's the internet, it's 2024. The more people that see it, inevitably the conversation's going to go from fun and lighthearted conversation to the trolls are going to come in force. And I'm curious how you deal with that. And is that something that you ever worried about as you started to get more and more views where you're like, are there ever days when you feel like it's not worth it? Like the trade-off is not worth it if you get those trolls that come, or have you been fortunate to avoid that to a point?
Well, it does really hurt. And when it really gets me down, what I'll do is I will drive to my bank, withdraw tens of thousands of dollars, and cry into it while I overlook my beachfront home. So it's really hard. No, and
retail therapy, everything feels better after that.
there is, like, in all seriousness, like, there is a little bit of some sensitivity, I think,
Yeah.
that I still experience with that for sure, especially when it gets like really personal, you know, like I think I'm a woman online, Mark, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like every single day somebody's saying something about my appearance.
Yep.
And it's, you know, right. I've had TikTok has actually stopped people from being able to comment on my videos at points because I just had people like dogpiling on there and saying just like horrific things. So it is tough, but then, like, in all seriousness about that joke I just made, like, I've never been doing better. You know what I mean? This is the best year I've ever had. So I'm just like, yeah, that's fine. Go ahead, you know, boost my engagement. So it is a little hurtful, but at the same time, it's like I'm they're not affecting me, and they're not making it so I can't get jobs or get work or anything like that. And that is something that I just kind of turn to when it does get tough, is I, you know, kind of look at everything I've built and I'm like, if they could, they would, and they can't. And I think that's why they're saying the things that they are.
Very valid. Did you feel that way from the beginning, or did you develop a thick skin over time? Like, I'm just curious if that was an evolution, or if you just came in, you know, I mean, nowadays you almost have to know if I'm going to create videos that are going to go viral, it is inevitable that this is going to happen. And so if you prepare yourself for it up front, but I guess I kind of think of it, you know, when I hear you put it that way, it's kind of like thinking like, how many A-list celebrities have got a bad review on a movie, but they're still doing just fine, you know, like there's the trade-off is there, I guess.
Absolutely. And I mean, I am sensitive to it. You know what I mean? Like, I just, like, I have learned that's the coping mechanism when I am feeling sensitive about it. It used to hurt a lot more, you know, when there wasn't that big payoff that was coming, you know, where I'm like, oh, this guy thinks I'm ugly online, but, you know, I just got booked with this dream company that I've been working for because they think I'm hilarious and they love my videos. So now I'm booked until December making ads for this company, and I don't have to worry about my mortgage until 2025, you know? So it's like, that's when it's easy to just, I don't care what Joe Schmo says. It's a lot harder when you're building all of that up and you're like, am I not good enough to be doing this? Is Joe Schmo right? You know, because I am still having to hustle and do the actor thing. I haven't, you know, quote unquote, like, made it to the point where I can just kind of like kick back and coast. So I think it's something for me anyway, and I think everybody's kind of different. For me, it developed with that, where I'm like, I had so much of that, you know, unfortunately external validation from like booking work and clients, because that's what matters to me at the end of the day, is, you know, being able to provide for myself and my family. And I'm like, that's what this is allowing me to do. And if I'm doing that, I don't care what Joe Schmo thinks.
I'm curious about so you talked about how this has led to work. Obviously that's the end goal. And I've talked with voice actors in the past about content creation. And I think there's this massive misconception that we're still trying to get over, that it has to be voiceover related content in order for it to be valid to your business from marketing standpoint. And I've said, like, look, if your passion is shoes and you're a passionate shoe collector and you post content about shoes and you become an authority in shoes, people who create commercials and produce videos and write documentaries wear shoes. Like, somewhere along the line, something will cross. Has that what it's been like for you? Is it just that the larger that your audience has gotten, just law of averages says you're getting in front of people who are making decisions on voiceover, even though that's not who you were specifically targeting?
Exactly. I
Okay.
verbatim, that is what I tell people who come to me who are asking for help when it comes to like what kind of content should I be creating, especially if I'm a new voice actor and I don't have any authority on like, instructing about voice acting or talking about voice
Right.
acting. And that's always what I tell them is talk we we're selling our voices, we're selling our personalities. We are so lucky in that sense that we can just talk about whatever it is that we're passionate about talking about. We become that person in that space, and then companies that revolve around that will hire you to represent them in some way or the other. I always tell people like I did go really meta with it. I do make stuff that is about voice acting because that is
Sure.
my whole life, but it has been since I was about 6 years old. So that is what I really know, but same, like I said, verbatim what you said, anything you're passionate about. So if it's shoes, start making that content about shoes, and then just make sure that it's very obvious on your profile and your hashtags and your captions and everything that that is something that you do. You're a voice actor and you have those capabilities to produce voiceover content.
It's like what Stefan Johnson has done. The guy talks about food, right? Like honestly, he talks about
Exactly.
food, but he's got a great voice. Obviously, you can hear that when you watch his content. Every once in a while, he would drop in a video talking about his voiceover, or whatever, and
Mhm.
he's been able to leverage that. So tell me
Yeah.
about your content strategy then. How did you decide what you were going to talk about, and how has that evolved over time, or has it? Are you still talking about the same things?
It definitely has evolved over time. Absolutely. It's typically like what I am just doing at that time when I'm involved in, and I'm sure it will evolve again. But like I said, I was doing comedy, like stand-up comedy for a really long time. So a lot of my stuff was like very sketch based. And then it's as simple as I just got tired of it. Like I didn't want to do it anymore. I wanted to talk about something else. And that's what I did. I started talking more about entertainment in general, like cartoons, nostalgia, that kind of thing, because that is just something I was gravitating towards.
Right.
But I have always talked about, I've like related it back to voice acting, much like Stefan, where it's like I'll have that thing that I'm doing, that I'm talking about my brand, and then I just incorporate voiceover some way into that.
All of your stuff still fits under, it seems to me like it fits under an overarching umbrella, but it's just different parts of it. So have you just found over time, like you mentioned, maybe I get tired of talking about something, or have you ever noticed that maybe a theme has run its course? Like I've done it, the audience isn't engaging with it in the same way, time to adapt or something like that?
Definitely, absolutely. I think that's a big part of being a content creator, and then just I think in traditional spaces as well, like in entertainment, where people and taste change and evolve. We've seen that. I think entertainment has been around long enough that we can see that stuff that was like really popular, genres that were really popular in past decades aren't popular anymore because things evolve and change. And I kind of think of my series as TV shows in that way, where it's like it's good for so many seasons and then the story is over.
Yep.
And I think that if you look at the content that you're creating like that, where it's like, have I said all I can say? Is the story over? And then when to like, finish that story and move on to the next one. That's what keeps you fresh and keeps you still being able to create things that people are interested in.
So that's where the behind the scenes comes into this. It's being able to look at the metrics, whether it's views or reactions, engagements, whatever, and seeing, okay, we're trending downward or whatever. Let's reevaluate, come up with something different. And so this is why it's not just about creating a great video or throwing up a great video. It's paying attention to also what's going on under the hood.
Exactly.
So what are you looking at when you're doing that? Are you just looking at the basic metrics that are provided from TikTok? Are you strictly looking at what's my views, what's my engagement, what's my watch time? Like, are there metrics that you would say these are the ones, like if I had to pick, these are the ones that I would follow? Because that's something that, man, you can fall down the rabbit hole on that stuff. Oh
Oh
my
yeah.
gosh. Like,
Yeah.
and it can feel really overwhelming if you're not like a data analyst or whatever, right? So what
Right.
are you looking at?
That is what I'm definitely looking at for sure. And then, you mentioned TikTok. Every app is different, like I have a platform on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, and every audience skews differently for what they like. Like if I'm doing stuff that's older, it's definitely going to be on Facebook because that is going to be like the 50 and up crowd pretty much. So I'm like anything that's like newer, anything that has like more language that is more current, like they're not going to get it, you know? So like that's a lot of like 80s content and stuff that I'm putting on Facebook.
Okay.
Um, you know, TikTok is definitely going to be things that are like more current. So my nostalgia stuff on TikTok, for example, is like stuff that is like 10 years old as opposed to, you know, Facebook, and then Instagram, YouTube are somewhere in the middle there. Um, but each platform has different analytics that you can look at, and they all work a little bit differently too. And a lot of it is just observation because your own analytics can only tell you so much. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you can compare how your own stuff is doing against each other, but then you have to look at like, okay, what's working for other people as well? What are the commonalities that I'm seeing here? And different platforms are different. So for example, right now Instagram really favors sharing. You know, that's the metric that they're looking at. They're looking for how many shares is something getting. That is going to show your video to more people the more shares it gets. For example, they're going to boost that in the algorithm. Right now TikTok, it seems to be comments, you know, and then that's where that just time comes into just having to like study that, and you can, like you said, really go down the rabbit hole on it.
One of the questions that I was going to ask, and you've partly answered it, was you are doing TikTok, you're doing Instagram, you're doing YouTube, you're doing Facebook, which that in and of itself can feel really overwhelming to people. How much of your content then is unique to platform, and how much do you just like, I've created this, I'm just going to share it across 3 or 4 or whatever?
Sure. um that is a really good question. Sometimes there's stuff that I share on every single platform because I'm testing too. I'm like,
Okay.
let's see how this is going to work.
Yep.
So a lot of times stuff is hitting on every platform. Generally, I have an idea, and if I know it's going to do really well on one platform, I might post it there first, and then I'll release it later to the other ones to kind of like test it out and see how it works. So I rarely will make something just for one specific platform unless it's like YouTube, because they particularly have that long form content that's very unique to YouTube. You know, you can't really do 15-30 minute videos on any other app right now.
Yep. No, and that's a part of it too, right? Is just understanding, like you said, understanding the demographics of the platform, the makeup of your audience, and this is where it's all that background unsexy stuff, and that's the difference
Yeah.
between making a video that you just assume is going to go viral and building a video for a specific audience on a specific platform because you've done the research to understand what's going to work there. So you obviously have certain themes that you've drawn from, you know, we touched on comedy. The corporate verse stuff that you used to do is freaking hilarious. Like
Thank
this
you.
mock, like, come on. Like you literally are saying, it's like, is it the saying the quiet parts out loud? Like it's what everybody is literally thinking when they're sitting there watching these videos or listening to these courses. Nobody's going to say it because, you know, HR is going to call them in and give them a
Right.
spanking, but it's like the stuff is, it's so much fun. Are you primarily sticking to those themes as you come up with them, or are you also watching and seeing, oh, here's something that's trending, maybe I should try to jump on that train?
Yeah, I have tried the trending stuff every once in a while. I have noticed that that typically doesn't do well for my specific demographic, which tells me some things. You know, I'm like, okay, and it's kind of cool. These people are here for this very specific
Yeah.
content I create, which is good because that means I'm like, I'm in a niche. I'm not doing this stuff because people are looking at that like trend or whatever. I'm not hopping on the trend, and that's what people are coming here for. People are coming to watch this very specific, for lack of a better word, like trick that I do, you know, with right now the series that I'm doing is like what your favorite says about you and nostalgia stuff. So it's like, do you remember this stuff from back then, and then doing a little summary of it in like a very like kind of schlocky way, like a very, you know, sum it up in 2 sentences poorly for comedic effect. And that is what people are specifically going to those channels for. They're not going to see me hopping on a trend or anything, which is kind of cool. You know, I'm like, I have a demographic, I have a market, I have a niche there.
I think that's an important thing to understand too, though, because it's really easy to try to chase views by chasing trends. The most annoying thing, and I see this a lot on X, there's a trending hashtag. You click on the trending hashtag because whatever, you hold Tesla stock, and so Tesla stock is trending on X, and so you click on the hashtag, and what you get are 3 posts about Tesla stock and 100 posts that have absolutely nothing to do with anything related to Tesla, but they're using the hashtag because they're trying to jump in on the trend, and I find that very annoying. But I can see where if you've built an audience over time, which you said you did your first video 4 or 5 years ago or whatever, like you built your audience over time. Why would you want to all of a sudden throw them this complete curveball that has nothing to do with anything that you've talked about just because you're trying to jump on a trend, unless it's relevant to what's going on again, right? Like I can see that too, but it's so important. It's paying attention to all of the little nuances that's what makes you successful ultimately.
Yeah. And then what works for me is not going to necessarily work for everybody else too. There's some people where like they do the trend, it relates to what they're doing, it works fantastic. That has not worked for me as of yet, and I try it every once in a while to see if something's going to change, because I think that's important too, is always making sure that you are trying new stuff, experimenting. It has not worked for me quite yet, but it works great for other people, and I think that's something to remember, is just how these apps respond, how the audience responds is going to be so unique to you as an individual.
I suppose there's probably a certain amount of algorithm training that goes into it too. Like if you're consistently over a long period of time talking about something very specific, and then all of a sudden you talk about something that is not at all specific to what you've been talking about, do you confuse the algorithm? Like, is that when it says, wait a minute, this isn't right? We're not, and so they don't push it out the same way?
I've seen that. And it depends on which algorithm you're looking at as well, because I've had the opposite happen with that on YouTube in some ways, because and depending on short form versus long form, those are 2 different algorithms as well.
Right.
That's very much the case with my short form stuff. If I veer a little bit away, it might be like, ooh, we don't know who to push this out to now. But with long form stuff, it's all about just being explosive and being dramatic. So like my long form content oftentimes doesn't have a whole lot to do with my short form stuff, because that thumbnail is what matters, but and then other times, you go outside the little box, you try something new and it blows up. So it's so tough to say, because that the algorithm, people do talk about that. They're like, oh, figure out the algorithm. It's constantly evolving and changing. So you are constantly having to adapt with it and figure it out.
Once upon a time, TikTok, and it was in the early stages of TikTok too, but it was possible. You could sign up for TikTok, have 0 followers, post the right video that just lands the right way, and go viral overnight. And it happened over and over and over and over again. And I'm sure part of that was just TikTok trying to build a following, create some hype, all that sort of stuff. Is that still possible?
Yes.
Do you know?
Yes, yeah? It is. Yeah, that is definitely something that you can see from new people. Like if you have a new account, TikTok wants to hook you. They're going to push your stuff out because you are new a lot of times. And then of course there is just like doing it well. So if you come in with like a really good hook, like you're scrolling through, somebody sees it and you're just like, this is so interesting. I need to know what's going to happen next. I need to hear the story, see what this person is doing, or they're so good at whatever it is that they're showcasing. I think it's absolutely still possible. I don't think that it's something anybody should bet on, if that makes sense. Like there is a gambling aspect to all of this. I always tell people, while I was transitioning into doing acting full time from my last jobs, I placed professional wagers on sports, and I was like supplementing, because I am pretty decent at like analytics and doing that kind of thing. I'm a spreadsheets person. It is so similar to that. Like I always joke with my friends, I'm like, my setup for doing my job today with creating content looks so much like when I was on DraftKings, like putting in wagers and being like, come on, Steph Curry.
Nice. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that process of, are you somebody who sits down, because you've got some themes that you draw from, or content pillars, or, however you reference them. Are you somebody who sits down and, like on a random Sunday afternoon, you map out for the week, or do you sit down and map out for the month? Are you flying by the seat of your pants? Is it when inspiration hits? Like, what does that look like?
I'm so glad you asked that, because it's a little bit of both. So I have my spreadsheets where I will get the ideas, you know. So I'll be watching something with my best friend and it'll be like 10 o'clock at night, and like she always laughs at this, like she'll just see me just like get up and like I have to go like type out something, and she just we don't even talk about it now, but she'll just like pause whatever we're watching, and then like I'll be doing my thing for like 5 minutes in there because I have like this idea that like I have to
Yep.
get down, otherwise it's going to be gone.
Yep.
So sometimes that happens quite a bit, you know. So I have a bunch of stuff that I want to work on, you know, that day, you know, or the following day or whatever. So I'll have those hours where I sit down and I write like several scripts. Um, and then other times you know, I have to wait for it to strike because I'm not feeling confident about it. And I would always rather release quality than quantity. The other reason that I'm like always a little hesitant to really map something out for the week, which I have heard people say, they're like, you know, oh, create a bunch of content on one day, get it all in the can, and then that way you can release it throughout the week. That, you know, do that one day, dedicate to that. Again, the algorithm changes so much that it's like, I don't want to do all this stuff, invest in all of this if I'm seeing that like this particular kind of video isn't trending, it's not going right. That's a waste of time to me. I'd rather like see how the algorithm is performing, see what's trending, see what people are reacting to, and then go off of that and create content. So it's a little bit of both. Sometimes I'm inspired and I'm really confident about the content that I'm creating. So I do have like a few videos that I'll put aside and have ready to go. But I am very aware that those might not see the light of day, and I have to adjust and then go back in and be prepared to like release something new.
So a lot of it is, it's the notebook with the ideas and seeing what gets to live and ultimately what doesn't. I'm curious then, I think one of the reasons why people get nervous about this is because of this belief behind the production, understanding how to edit and having the studio set up and all of these different things. And from the videos that I've watched that you've created, you're not making Hollywood movies here. Like the value that you bring comes in the actual words that you speak. It's in the script, it's in the comedy, it's in like, it's not highfalutin production value with, you know, we're not making Mr. Beast stuff here. Talk about your actual production process. Are you shooting on a camera? Are you shooting on a phone? Is it just a basic setup and away we go? Like what does that look like?
Yeah. Most people are looking for something that is not as produced. Like, yes, there's Mr. Beast, of course, there is that produced stuff. But what a lot of people are looking for is something that is more authentic these days, which is what I try to bring to it, as it's like something that is very much like, oh, this is a person. This is like my friend. There was this demographic of my audience that started calling me Auntie Tawny, like these like younger folks. And I was like, oh, picking that up and rolling with it.
Right.
Absolutely. And so I started using that in my production. And that's what it feels like. And it should feel like, is like, it's this person that you trust, this person that you like. It feels like family. It feels like a friend. And I think if you go too overly produced, that creates more of a wall. There's more of a disconnect there. If you allow that kind of intimacy with your audience, I think it gives you them more of a connection to you, you know, which is going to make them come back and want to see you, to see what you're doing and have that loyalty to you. So I just record on an iPhone. I have the ring lights, you know, I obviously have a professional in-home studio, of course, but like, as far as like the actual production part goes, you know, it's on my phone. I do have that rig that connects the Mojave mic into my phone, so you're getting a little bit better audio. Well, it's it's $1,000 mic, so it is better audio quality. So you're, like, it's a little better, you know, like it's a $30 lavalier. It's
But
Mojave.
was it always that way?
No,
Like was every video like that? Like going back to the beginning?
no, it wasn't. I started out with a little $30 clip-on, you know, mic that you
And
do.
that's the point, right?
Yeah,
You got to start somewhere. You
and I
don't
mean, those do
have to
great.
have that professional, you know, all the fancy equipment or whatever. You grow into it.
A lot of people create gorgeous videos of them talking, doing reviews, doing anything like that in their cars, you know, because you have the natural lighting. They sit in their
Yep.
car. It looks great. You do a green screen in the back, which, you know, I use CapCut to edit on my phone. So you can do those green screens like I do. You can create content as long as the message, the quality, the delivery is good. You're the center focus. It doesn't have to do with the tech. And I think that like being voice actors, we see a lot of people get really hung up on the tech side, the gear side. And I'm like, there's too much focus on that. It's not that important. Like decent, yes, but you don't need the tens of thousands of dollars in equipment. If you're not a good actor, it's not going to do anything for you.
It really does come back to what you're saying, right? It's more about the actual content of the video. Does it resonate with the audience more so than it is how is it produced? And you said authentic. Well, let's see. What is the number one most referred to word in every single voiceover audition that has come out in the last 5 years across any genre? Probably
Not
authentic,
announcery.
right? Like, so, I mean, if you're delivering these things, it stands to reason. If that's what everybody's looking for in their commercials and their corporate videos and whatever, why wouldn't that connect, that authenticity connect the same way in a video on social media? So, I mean, that makes sense. Talk about the hook. You mentioned the hook.
Yeah.
What is the hook? How do we get the hook?
So the hook is that first 1 to 3 seconds, because that is all the attention that we have. That is the extent of our attention spans. Yeah. I know within the first 2 seconds, if I want to watch a video when I'm flipping through these, I'm like, no, this is boring. So it's like, what is it that's going to grab your attention in those couple of seconds? That's why I talk fast in these videos. That's why I go in prepared with the script. And that's why I say something more often than not chaotic, or like that will get a reaction in those first seconds. Like I called the 1990s, the late 1900s in a video recently, because I knew people were going to go, it was something like, I was I was alive in the 90s. Like I fully know.
Making me feel older than I already feel.
Yeah.
Moving on.
I'm old too. I just know it. But, stuff like that, or saying words that are going to make people go, what is that? What's interesting? So like I say fever dream, like these movies were a fever dream. People are like, what was so crazy about them? What was it? Anything like that, chaos, unhinged, like, or just particular words that are going to let somebody know this is for me. I did have a 1 million view video recently where I talked about goth kids shows. That's interesting. So you have to think about, like, don't bury the lead, as they say, which is very old advice. That's not new. Come in with the big headline. And I think if you frame social media in those like very traditional ways that we already have grown up knowing, like headline on a newspaper, like they were never like, starting out the headline with something really demure and dainty or anything like that. It was always like big chaos fire in downtown. Like it was always like, what? It was always crazy. You do that same thing when it comes to content creation as well. You just don't bury the lead. Come in like, this is what the video is going to be about. So if you're creating food content, this chocolate cake sent me into a coma. It was that good. I left my husband over this chocolate cake. Like something, like, it has to be something just big, silly. It doesn't have to be
curiosity, right? It makes them want to know more.
That's the hook,
Is that the hardest part to come up with? Do you think? Like that, to me, that would be the thing that I would spend the most time trying to figure out, because like, you can create a really great video, but if you don't have the right hook, who's going to watch it? They're not even going to get to the middle part of the content or whatever.
I think you write the content first, and then you're like, okay, how am I starting this? So that's a lot of times what I do is I have the idea, I write it down, and then I'll let it sit, I'll let it marinate, and I'll put a few different things on there. And I'm like, how else could I say this? Like, how can I bring the point of this up to the front? I'll edit and move stuff around. So if I was writing it and in the middle, I'm like, oh, that's a really good joke. I'm like, let me take that joke, rework it, and put it up here in the front. So I'm leading with that. So I think giving yourself that time to like play and have fun with it, I think that is what will lead to really good hooks. And then also being exposed to good content too, watching that good content. Like I think writers are told they should be readers. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like all really amazing writers are voracious readers. And I think if you want to make content, you have to love content too, like that. And I do, you know, like however that is going to make me come across. Like I love watching content. I love listening to people. I love really good comedy, really good storytelling. Like I am genuinely so very in love with it. So it's easy. It doesn't feel like, oh my God, I have to make content. Oh my God, I have to watch TikTok or Reels or something. Like, ugh. Like that's one of the best parts of my day, because I love entertainment. So I think that it's always going to be tough for people if it feels like a chore, which is just kind of a part of every business too. There's parts of my business that I do not like, of course, because we all
Sure.
have that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Are you doing it all on your own, or are you using, or have you experimented at all with using like a ChatGPT or a Claude, or giving it an idea and asking it to expand on it, or, you know, giving it an idea and saying, what's the hook in here? Or you play around with that at all?
I haven't found anything that is quite able to do what I do quite yet. I'm sure it's going to get there, like based on all of the connections and friends I have that are working on and in this stuff. I'm very privileged to know the people behind all this stuff, and I'm like, oh, it's going to be able to do what I do, absolutely, at some point. So far, it hasn't quite been able to. It's helpful when it comes to like research for like mining data, in other
Sure.
words,
Yep.
scraping. It's been very helpful in that sense, but like as far as like being able to do exactly what I do, not quite yet, because I'm also making decisions based on feelings
Yep.
in this a lot of times, which it hasn't quite been able to do that yet. So we'll see.
So how much time do you spend after the video's been published? How much time do you spend in the comments getting to understand how your audience is responding? Like, because I'm assuming there's an element of that that leads to the next idea, or, you know, I tried this and it didn't work the same way, so I'm not going to do that again. I'm guessing that's part of it.
It is, yeah, it is, and there's a balance there, because sometimes that's very helpful. Um, Other times not so much, because you can see people that'll be like, "Oh my God, talk about this, talk about this, talk about this," and you'll see everybody's like saying that, and you're like, "Oh man, the people want it. I'm gonna make this," and you make it, and it doesn't go anywhere, you know.
Right.
So there's a balance there, and I have found that like working in retail as well, and just working in business. I've been self-employed since I was 18, and I have found that like the customer does not know what the customer wants, like 9 times out of 10. Like, you don't know what you want. I know what you want, but you don't know what you want.
Why
And
does
I
that
don't
sound like also sitting in a directed session with 6 people on the other side of Source Connect?
right? Like, oh, isn't that a joke about AI where it's like AI will take my job once the director knows what they want and they're able to communicate that?
Oh man.
There's wonderful directors that all in good fun,
Yes.
all jokes. Directors are lovely, so communicative, so clear. Um, I I don't know what it is either too. It's really interesting, and I think that it does come down to communication. So you'd think though that like with something as simple as somebody just like requesting a movie, and that like particular movie or something getting like, you know, 70,000 likes when somebody says it, you're like, "Oh man, 70,000 people just even had a reaction to be like, yeah, I want to see that." And it doesn't go anywhere. Part of that is of course the algorithm, you know, it goes back to that. So there's like a
Yep.
little bit of a balance, and like knowing when the right time to do that is too. um there's a lot of external factors at play.
What does the timeline look like? So you're creating videos for Instagram, TikTok. I'm guessing these are, you know, on average, what, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, somewhere
Yeah.
kind of in that range.
Yeah.
Start to finish, how much time, ballpark, on average, are you spending putting together one of these videos?
Probably 5 hours total.
Okay.
Probably
5
5 hours
hours.
total.
But the point that I'm getting here is you spend 5 hours working on a video that gets potentially hundreds of thousands, if not potentially millions of views. And so you have to look at it's a return on investment equation too,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Like for some people, they'll sit and say, 5 hours, that's ridiculous. I could do this, this, and this, and this. Now, I think it's also important to remember that you may have been spending 5 hours on those videos in the beginning and you weren't getting
Right.
500,000 views or 1,000,000 views. It's something that builds up
Right.
over time. Do you know approximately how long it took you to to get to a point on your channels where you're like, okay, here we go. Like, this is working now. Was it a month, 6 months, a year of posting consistently? Like, what did it look like?
3 years.
3 years of posting consistently. What is posting consistently?
Every other
Once
day.
a week? Every day?
Every other day.
Every other day for
Yeah.
3 years.
Every other day for 3 years. Not a lot of weekends off, not a lot of days off very often, like which I don't recommend, because I got sick. And that was when I took time off, was when I burned out, I got sick. And I was in a situation where like I had to work like that, extenuating circumstances. My husband passed away, and that was my partner with everything. And COVID happened. So, and then I actually did get actually sick. I got a stomach infection. So I was in and out of the hospital for a year. So I was just, life happens, and
Yep.
I had to kind of like pull myself up by my bootstraps and just kind of like, put my head down and hustle really hard. For years, I was really, really, really lucky that I had my best friend bought a home and offered me very affordable rent to stay with her while I was kind of getting back up on my feet during all of this time too. And then that's about how long it took for me to get like really, I would say like really comfortable, like financially, and like have it all working out, which I feel very, very grateful and lucky for, because that is still, even then, that is within the realm of like of success. If we look at like business, again, I've been self-employed since I was 18. Most businesses, you're not seeing a return until you're 3 to 5 years into your business. So anything before that is miraculous. You're doing incredible. Like there's some kind of combination of luck and hard work and talent that is like coming together there so that you are successful before 3 to 5 years in. So for me, it was 3 years of really putting my head down, and it still took 3 years.
I think that's really important for people to hear. And I remember listening to a podcast with Gary Vee, and I'm going to, butcher this, but the general idea behind it, he was, doing a Q&A on this podcast, and he was talking about somebody who had came to him who was like, Gary, I did what you said on Twitter, and it's not working. And he's like, how long do you do it for? He's like, well, I did it for like 2 months. He's like, shut up and come back and talk to me when you've been doing it for 3 years every day. Right. And I think that we need that reminder, because look, can you create that one video that goes to the stratosphere? Sure. I mean, it's happened. There is a much higher probability that this is going to be doing exactly what you did, which is just do the thing consistently for a long period of time, and eventually you produce a return on investment. And that's whether you're creating video content or blog content or podcasts or whatever it is that you're doing. Consistency over the long term is generally where the results come from.
And there's still no guarantee. And that's what I always tell people, because every day I have people reach out who are like, I want to be a voice actor. What do I do? And will tell them all the stuff, and they're like, okay, so then it'll happen. And I'm like, no, you can do absolutely everything right. And there is always a component of luck in there. There's
Yep.
right place, right time. And you are going to increase your chances the more you keep showing up, of course. But there is always that component of luck. And we see so many people that are quote unquote overnight successes. And I've seen people speak about me in that way in various publications or on podcasts or something. They're like, wow, you just blew up overnight. I'm like, yeah, it took 30 years to blow up overnight. Like I got my first job when I was 6 years old, and I'm going to be 34 in December. So it's taken that long because, again, life happens, stuff happens, and you have to adjust and you have to put things on pause. And that is part of it. And we don't talk enough about all of the risk and all of that stuff that's involved in it. I think in our industry, it's just, if you work hard, it'll happen. If you do XYZ, it'll happen. And you have to give it that time, and you have to realize the risk that comes with it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the things where a lot of people miss is you give up too easy, too soon, and because it's not working for you. And then you never know, right? You never know. So one of the things that you talked about was getting the engagement. By and large, I know every social media algorithm has its nuances, but across the board, these algorithms are designed to keep people on the platform longer.
Right.
And so if you're creating video content and people are watching that video content, you're doing what the algorithm wants, which is keeping them on the platform longer, right? So that's good. We need engagement to do that. You said that you spend some time in the comments, but you don't spend a ton of time, because obviously that is a rabbit hole that you could fall down in a very happy or very dark and evil way, depending on which comments you get looking at. What are you doing to try to drive engagement? Is it like, are you asking questions that would generate comments? Are you hoping that you just hit on the right subject matter? Like, do you have a specific strategy to drive that engagement?
Yes, all of those things. So it is asking questions, or it is, for me, it's nostalgia specifically. So it's making people go, oh my God, I remember that, because that's what we get so excited about. Nostalgia is so powerful. That is really what I lean on. Questions too, like, hey, was this just me? Or like saying, the other thing too, I'm not the first person to say this. I can't remember who did or what it's called. But if you say something that like begs people to correct it or have like a strong emotional response, that's going to drive engagement, So if you say something that's like incorrect technically, or you have an opinion that's like the wrong opinion, that is going to make people comment on the video. That's going to rile people up.
That's where you could potentially go down that very dangerous, dark and evil rabbit hole if you pick them off the wrong way.
Like I do it very lightly too. Like I'm not trying to, be problematic or anything, of course, but like one of the things I did recently was I said, does anybody else's moms watch these shows in the 90s? And my mom and I aren't very far apart in age. So she was watching these like teenage shows in the 90s when I was like quite young, so I was between like 6 and 10, and she was in her 20s, right? So I said, did anybody else's moms watch these shows? So all these 40 somethings were like, what do you mean anybody's mom? Like, I couldn't be your mom. And I'm like, of course I know that. You know what I mean? Most people have more than 20 years apart between themselves and their parents. I don't.
Right.
But like, that was a true story. Like I vaguely remembered these shows that my mom was watching when I was really young, and I didn't understand what was going on, in like Roswell or Felicity, those shows, Dawson's Creek. I'm like, I just knew there were teenagers, teenagers and aliens, I think. Like, I can't remember. I was 6, so that's how I started that out, like knowing that was going to be the reaction that gets people to comment, so it's not anything, again, like that was my lived experience, but I knew that like my lived experience was going to be like shocking to people. Same thing with like, I mentioned earlier, talking about like nostalgia and that kind of thing. Like, does anybody remember these movies? Does anybody else do this? Has anybody else experienced this? That's inviting people to share,
Yep.
And that's what gets that engagement, is like, and spending time in the comments too, of course. Like, it gets to a certain point. Like, I'll typically spend time in the comments early on to like kind of drive that conversation. And then typically with my videos, it gets to a point where I'm like, I can't keep up with the comments anymore, and I have to like move on.
Yep. So now that you've grown multiple platforms, hundreds of thousands of followers, multi-millions of views, that's opened up the door for some opportunities. I mean, I guess you're an influencer now, right? You have the audience. I can tell by the way you're acting, like, I don't like that term.
Oh, I hate it, because I'm too old to have that word used on me.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this. You are represented now for your social media, like you're working with an agency?
Yes, okay. That's correct. Yeah.
So talk about that, what that looks like, and what kind of opportunities that opens up, because that's the other side of this, right? If you're reaching a big enough audience as a voice actor, you can generate voiceover opportunities. You've obviously done that. But when you have access to a large enough audience, you can open up a whole other revenue stream through a different form of content. So what does that look like, and how has your audience responded to that?
Most of them understand. I think at this point, most people understand if you're creating very consistent content, you're spending so much of your day on that content, like I am now. You have to monetize. If people want to keep getting that content, you have to monetize. So I think most people understand, most people get it. I have not had a lot of people at all be like sell out or, anything
Yep.
like that. It's been very rare, which I appreciate. I appreciate that most people understand that. Um, it's it's really cool because what that agency gives you is kind of the ability to focus on other stuff more because they're handling all that. They're handling communications. They're doing the invoicing, so you don't have to go chase after somebody trying to get your money. They come with like all this backing, of like, hey, we're gonna sick our people on you unless you pay your bill. They just handle all of it. They do all the communications. They're making sure everything runs really smoothly. They're doing all of the reaching out. If there's anybody I want to work with, I ask them to reach out. So it frees up so much time, which is wonderful. Particularly my agency, they're very communicative. They're very available, which I really, really like. But it's been a really good experience. And I think it's important for voice actors to realize too, like as AI is becoming more mainstream and it's like getting better and better and better, realizing that content creation is going to be just such an essential part of being a voice actor and using it to not only like, have people find you for voiceover jobs, but to have that audience too, because that is what a lot of people are hiring based on. Because if the AI sounds as good as you sound, what are you bringing to the table? The
Right.
audience, the celebrity
Yep.
status, which is what social media is now. We're very much evolving into that as being our entertainment is social media. We all know what's going on in Hollywood and everything. So I think it's important to be prepared for that and knowing like if you want to be an entertainer, a performer, it has to be on social media. I personally believe that. I'm sure there's other people that are going to disagree with me out there, but as long as I've been working in this industry from what I've been seeing and as active as I am in it, I really think that's the direction we're heading.
I've seen audition specs that have asked for what's your social media following, and I'm like, frig, I don't want to get the
Yep.
same auditions as you or Stefan because
See, and that's so funny. Like I'm like
it's not a
just like
level playing field at this point. I
you
have
can't.
dozens of followers. I bring you an audience of dozens of followers.
And meanwhile, I'm over here. I'm like, you can't put me in the same level as Stefan. Stefan is miles above me. Oh my gosh, Stefan is A-list. He's incredible.
But it is something like it goes to your point though, right? When they start
Yeah.
asking that question, there's a reason why they're asking that question. And I think I've seen it happen and I've seen voice actors push back at it. And obviously the reason why they're saying they're pushing back on it is because it's nobody's business and that's not what you're paying for. But the reality is they're pushing back on it because they know that they don't have a social media strategy and they don't have a following. And so they're not going to be able to compete. And
Yeah.
so it's one of those things where it's something that we probably do need to be aware of. It becomes a value add at that point.
It really does. And this is, it's so hard to talk about this stuff, I feel like, without sounding disrespectful. So like, I just want to like put that out there, like first and foremost, like I absolutely know that it's so hard to talk about, but I think that the reality, that's just the reality of the situation too. Like, I think this is very much like, it's so similar to when we went from silent films to talkies, and people didn't make the transition over. It is so hard to say, no, we're not going to use this technology, put it back in the box, don't use it once the technology is there and available. And I think that like, you have to evolve with it. You have to pivot. And is it sad that like your thing is going away? Absolutely. Like, I think that is a much bigger conversation though, into like societal safety nets beyond like, that kind of is very similar to like, transitioning from like coal mining to like other kinds of energy where it's like, yes, we absolutely should help people who need to transition as technology changes. But I don't think that just like putting your, what is it saying? Putting your heels in the ground and like, just like, no, I'm
Yeah.
not going to do it. I don't think that you're going to win
It's not
just
the
like
winning
based on
strategy.
history.
Here's the other thing that goes with that though. I think there's also a misconception, and this is something that I've been learning over time. There's a misconception that in order for my social media to add value, I have to have hundreds of thousands of followers or I have to have millions of followers. But the reality is there are influencers, like legitimate influencers who have audiences of 5,000 people
Yeah.
because they've built a very specific and targeted
Yep.
niche.
Yep.
And so I think that's the other side of it. Do you need to embrace social media? Well, should you embrace social media? Yeah, you probably should embrace social media. But I would also say don't go in thinking that unless I can build this massive audience, it's not going to be worth it. Because if you can come to a commercial, an agent sends out a commercial audition and you happen to have a very targeted audience that's in that space and it's only 10,000 people, that still brings value, and that still might be enough to make the difference. And so part of it is just the perspective in how we look at it as well. But there's a
Absolutely.
brave new world out there in the social media space. I've told my wife so many times that when I retire, whenever that day comes, I will be so grateful to never have to look at social media ever again. But in the
I
meantime, I will use it. I will leverage it however I can
Yeah.
to further my business and further my career. Now, I know you do some coaching.
Mhm.
You do coaching and voiceover. Are you teaching social media stuff at this point as well?
Yeah, I think it's essential. Absolutely. That is always part of the conversation when I'm coaching. Most of the people that I'm working with, because I'm pretty particular. I'm working, so I don't have a lot of time to be coaching. So at
Yep.
this point, it's usually a 3-month wait. You can always email me, of course, like to see if I can move some stuff around if it's an emergency. But typically I'm working with people and I'm doing a very one-on-one business plan type of thing with them. So it's like, how can we get you from where you are to where you want to be? Because I know how to get to those particular points. So that's what I sit down with people and talk about. And I always, always, always include social media strategy in that. I think that you have to do it now. I think it's absolutely essential.
Yeah. So if somebody's interested in getting on the wait list, finding out a little bit more, and obviously we need to get connected with you on all of the social media profiles as well. And I'll include all of this in the show notes, but where are we going and what are we looking for?
Thank you. So tawnyvoice.com is kind of the central hub where you can find absolutely anything. And Tawny PLATIS is my handle absolutely everywhere. I have a very unique name. I'm like Tigger. I'm the only one. So if you just look up
Very,
Tawny
very
PLATIS,
fortunate to not be like Bob Smith and
right? Yeah,
Bob Smith 345 or whatever.
right. Yeah, I am the only one. So just Tawny PLATIS on all my social medias handles and you'll find me.
So are you putting together a pitch for VO Atlanta or something like that? Because I think you could have a sellout session.
No. I actually, funny enough, you talked about like wanting to retire and never look at social media again. I am very introverted, so it would take a lot of incentive for me to go to something like that where there's like a lot of people and very public. Like Marc, you're lovely to talk to, but after this, I'm going to need 3 to 5 business days to recover, and I'm going to have to hide hide in my little.
When I go to VO Atlanta by 6:30, everybody's like, "Where's Marc?" And I'm like, "Marc's in bed, curled up in the fetal position. He can't handle any more people today. I love you, but I need to just." So I'm a introvert, borderline hermit. I'm like right
You
there
get
with you.
me.
So
Yeah, I live on a house on top of a canyon, and my favorite days are when it's just me and my dog walking through those canyons, and I don't have to open my mouth.
that just makes me appreciate this even more. The fact that somebody who is so hardcore introverted just happens to be creating videos that are generating such massive audiences and getting all of this. It's a very interesting, ironic aspect of the social media world.
That's what I like about it so much, though, is because it was so very difficult for me, liking to perform, loving to perform, to entertain, but so much of being an actor, there is like a social component there, and it was so hard for me, and especially like being out in places where that stuff goes on, where it's very loud, there's lots of lights, that's very intense for me in a lot of ways. So being able to like still entertain, to perform, to like create, and to have that so much on my terms has been absolutely wonderful for me, to be able to be at home where it's quiet,
Yeah.
and to be able to like, when I'm done, I can be done. I'm not like freaking out somewhere at a restaurant or something.
So one more question. There's somebody that's listening to this who has an idea
Mm.
and they've been sitting on that idea in a failure to launch scenario. Maybe it's a fear thing, an uncertainty thing. Maybe it's, they're worried about production or their skill set or whatever it is, whatever the reason is but they're sitting on an idea, but they're in the failure to launch scenario. Knowing now that the introverted side of you, and that this was not like probably a natural and easy thing for you to just pick up your phone one day and be like, let's make a video. what is the advice? What is a piece of advice that you would give to that person to help them just get the first video online?
Get it online. I think that creating it, like I actually think taking those steps, like even just making it and sitting on it and having it there is a big step.
Yep.
And knowing and getting really comfortable with the fact that it might not do well.
Yep.
You know, I think that is something that you have to really get into your head, that it's okay. You know, it's okay to fail and fail and fail and fail and fail. And we don't talk about that enough. I feel like a lot of the advice people get with this, it's like, do it, it's going to be great. You know, just do it and it'll all work out. You know, it might not. And you might have to do it quite a few times and relaunch and rebrand. And there's no guarantee that it's going to work out, but every time you do it, you're going to learn and you're going to increase your chances of it working out. And then you might get lucky too. Like I said, there's very much a gambling component to all of this as well. You know, there is always a chance that like you get it right on the first shot, you put something out there, it goes viral and you're done. You know, you can just coast. It worked out great. So I guess you'll never know until you try. Just be okay with potentially needing to go back to the drawing board. That's very normal. I think that a lot of us in this space, like we hear things from people that are like coaches and stuff and who want to sell their classes. I think they're like, you know, make sure you're prepared. Don't mess up. Make sure you're prepared. Make sure you're prepared. And it's like, that's good advice to an extent, but like there's no foolproof, fail-proof way to do any of this.
Yep.
And that's okay. That's normal.
Yep. What's your spreadsheet say about the odds of the Red Sox winning the World Series this year? Just
not a baseball girly.
Oh man, you told me you're all about the DraftKings and you got your spreadsheets. And
I did MMA and I did basketball, but MMA was, and basketball I did like more on the side just because of like the pool was bigger, but like MMA was really what I specialized in because I did MMA like very recreationally for a lot of years. So that one was a lot easier to pick up. And Holly Holm and Ronda Rousey are what got me to be able to go full time actually in voiceover and quit my job.
There you go.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Tawny, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your willingness to share and you know, for coming out of your shell for an hour. And you know, take your time now. Whatever it is that you got to do, go sit on the patio and woosah and breathe or whatever it is. It makes me even more grateful that you came and that you shared this. And I know there's a ton of information in here that's going to help a lot of people because this social media game, you know, we got to figure it out. It is an adapt or die kind of scenario, right? Nobody wants to get left behind. So we got to figure it out. You're helping us figure it out. So thank you.
No, thank you. And I just want to say thank you so much for having me on. When I did start going full time, I had found you and a lot of your stuff really helped me during that transition period back in like 2017, I want to say, when I was starting to go full time. So it's a little surreal to be talking to you right now. I was like, oh my God, I listened to this podcast like for that first year. This is crazy.
We're going to wrap this with the Circle of Life from The Lion King. It'll be great music to play us out.
Perfect.
All right, Tawny, thank you so much.
Thank you.